As I think they said, I am the founder of Strictly VC and the Silicon Valley editor of TechCrunch, and I am still trying to sort of understand what an ICO is. So I'm going to be learning today, along with many of you, from our esteemed panelists, about whether ICOs are here to stay, and if so, why. So thank you so much, Joe, Rebecca, and Tim, for being here.
Thank you, Connie.
Great to be here.
I thought we could maybe just start off with like a basic definition of what an ICO is. Rebecca, do you want to maybe take this?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot, and you guys feel free to jump in. So just in the most basic level, it's another way to raise money. You don't have to give away equity. You don't have to take in debt. You don't have to, mortgage your house or your firstborn. And it's a way to really tie the consumer to your business and your product. So you're giving away basically a good or service tied to your product. And then you create sort of a group of evangelists out there that have the same goal that you do, which is to have that value go up over time.
Yeah, so our legal team and all of our legal advisors are not comfortable with the term ICO. There are different kinds of token launches. Some of them can be tokenized securities. Some of them can be utility tokens or protocol tokens. If you're issuing a utility token and the SEC, based on your legal work, the SEC would not deem that to be a security, you don't want to start using language that might lead a potential token purchaser to believe that there's some sort of security aspect to it. And so the SEC looks very carefully at the utterances that you make, and so using ICO, which sounds a lot like IPO, could be a little bit misleading to a token purchaser.
So I look at it a little differently. So I feel like we have just opened up a whole new piece of our potential economy. There was the for-profit enterprise where you've got it's owned by the shareholders, and then you've got a non-profit enterprise that's sort of owned by society. And then you've got this new thing. I don't know whether you call it an ICO or you call it token launch.
Or token generation event. Yeah.
I like that.
Whatever you call it, it's a whole new thing. It's where you think about a for-profit enterprise, you're thinking of building a profit. A non-profit, it's like, what can I do out of the goodness of my heart? And a token is, how do I create a movement? How do I create a sociological transformation? How do I make something extraordinary happen to society? And if you do it right, it will spread and grow in value. But it's very different from owning a piece of a company or spreading the good word around through a nonprofit. It is spreading the good word around, and it's this new thing that is allowing all of us and all of you to apply your creativity to a new form and a new way of thinking, and it is going to do some extraordinary things for the world. So I think it's a bigger deal than the internet. I think it's a bigger deal than any of the industrial revolutions. It's basically an opportunity and a new technology that we can all use to transform society in all different ways.
Expanding on that just a little bit, tokens can be used for a wide variety of things. They can be Beyonce tickets, they can be a money, they can be a share in a company.
Well, and maybe it would be helpful for the audience too, just to talk about utility token, what that is, right?
Right.
And make it tangible.
Beyonce is a movement.
Right. Tim, let him talk.
This is true. So a utility token is a token that is essentially like a piece of software, and it's intrinsic to the functionality of a system or a platform. Along the lines of what you were indicating, one of our hypotheses at our company Consensus is that the nature of business is evolving, where we have businesses that are walled gardens, that are siloed IT infrastructures built on legacy database technology. We have this new database technology that's shareable and trustworthy so that actors with different agendas can share non-redundant infrastructure. And so businesses are going to be replaced by these open platforms that you are talking about, where they're end-sided markets, they're protocol-based open platforms, and many different people in different roles, many different companies in different roles will participate to emerge a set of services where a business in the Web 2.0 world used to be in that role. None of those entities are going to be overly controlling or overly monetizing. So in that sense, it's
so can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I talk?
This time it's your time.
Sorry. Anyway, so the two examples, right, of just for the audience, and that I think is really helpful and to understand what this can do in terms of blockchain and ICOs, and this is more blockchain probably, but your example of the copy and trademark, sort of allowing artists to actually...
Ujo music platform?
Yeah, exactly. It's a great example of just sort of distributed network where, we had Napster back in the old days, but now you actually can assign value, right? And people can actually claim their copyright, and they can actually get rewarded for that, which is really delightful. And then the other one that is lately is, we do a lot in healthcare IT, and your firm has as well. And this whole question of how do you get all the data in one place? I mean, that was just like this issue that people are just breaking their pick over time and time again. And the answer is you don't have to. It's on blockchain, you can put it there, and you can create a company around it and issue an ICO, and there's a company out there doing that called PocketDoc, that they just looked at it and like, why are we trying to solve this problem? It's our own creation. It doesn't have to be centralized.
So I think that there's no argument. These are, very appealing. Blockchain's amazing. ICOs are, I think something like $2.3 billion.
Token launches.
I'm sorry.
Wow.
Right. Okay. Well, what I wanted to say is, I just wonder if you're being sort of optimistic and thinking that if you don't use the word ICO, the SEC is not going to pay attention. And the SEC, I'm sure most of you here know, but it's the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, which, unlike in countries like Singapore and Switzerland, which are very open to ICOs, in the U.S., they're trying to sort of figure it out, and they've been messaging to companies that they're paying attention. They've said, look, we are going to consider some of these securities, and also, by the way, don't invest in an ICO just because a celebrity has backed it. But mostly they seem to be in the information gathering stage. So I am kind of interested, have they contacted you, Joe? So Joe's the co-founder of Ethereum, in addition to Consensus. Have they talked to you a little bit about trying to understand the difference?
I have spoken to people at the SEC.
Okay, and do you think that they understand the difference between a utility and a otherwise?
Very interested people who are trying to understand the context that's evolving around them. So no judgments, really. They're certainly in information gathering mode. The token launch space is regulated already. It's well regulated by the SEC. There are many projects that are probably running afoul of the current laws in the United States and other countries. There are many projects that do very careful work, and you're indicating, you're right, it's not sufficient to just be careful about your language, but it's necessary to be careful about your language because you can have a straight-up utility token, and if you start using certain kinds of language that the SEC believes will cause you to lead token buyers into a purchase with the expectation that they're going to make some profit off the backs of others, by the agency of others, then that can be deemed a security by the SEC. So if you are much more careful in your languaging, then it could be deemed a pure utility token by the SEC.
So I look at this and I think, first of all, the US SEC has been very good at sort of allowing hands-off and allowing these innovations to happen. So I actually think the US is starting to recognize that this might be one of the great technologies that transform society, and they want to be a part of it. On the other hand, China is blocking it up. And I'm looking and I'm thinking, all of these governments, they're starting to fall under their own weight because with the blockchain, what does it do? It does a much better job of keeping track of people, does a much better job of insurance. It lays things out. It's honest, fair, uncorruptible. And so these governments are starting to recognize they don't need to be as big as they are. And they really know that the freer they are, the richer their people become. And so that's why Japan put their hand up and said, yeah, we're accepting Bitcoin. And here are the very simple regulations for an ICO in Japan. They're saying, come on in. Yeah. This is for you guys. Come on in. And then China's blocking it off, and they're basically saying to their people, we're going to trap you, and you're going to miss out on all this amazing development that's going to happen over the next 20 years, and you're trapped. And so the great Chinese entrepreneurs are going to leave China, and they're going to go to Japan and the US and Singapore and some of these countries that are more open and free. And so these countries are starting to recognize that they're in competition with each other for us. All of a sudden, a lot of our governance is global. A lot of our governance is going to be done on the blockchain, Bitcoin, Ethereum. A lot of that governance can be handled that way. And think about all the parts of government that are all tied to insurance or keeping track of you.
Yeah.
Beyond that,
to reinforce that point, if you take all the foundational elements of our society, money, identity, reputation, agreements, things like government certificates, all of these things are realized in frictional or delay-filled forms. Clearing and settlement in transactions involving all those things can extend over hours, days, months. If you make them all natively digital on registries, on blockchains, in a trustworthy context, you can essentially shrink the clearing and settlement, the delay, the friction in virtually all those transactions into the instant of the transaction and create a virtually friction-free economy. So if you're a regulator, do you want to stand in front of that growth engine?
But there's so much specific to ICOs that I think are unanswered, including for investors like the two of you that I wanted to ask. Like, what do you do with the cash and the tokens on the balance sheet of your venture-backed company? Forward. How do you then value the company?
Let me just, I will answer the cash and token. So 10-ish years ago, I invested in Lending Club, right? Wasn't that different? Disintermediation of banks, frictionless, peer-to-peer, not regulated, and guess what? They were regulated, and Prosper got hit with a huge class action lawsuit, right? Because people lost a lot of money early. I don't see this as different. I think ICOs will absolutely be regulated. You can place
they already are.
But under a security law, I'm not done. I'm not done.
Okay, you keep
they're very well regulated. The SEC
the
indicated they'd look at the facts
and circumstances
they'll look at the facts of every
and
situation.
And we've seen this game before, right?
Well, no, I think in your case,
I'm talking to
the banks.
PayPal tried to go out and say, we're not money transmitters. We're really not. Guess what they were? Lending Club, we're not a security, and Prosper, I mean, you guys paid the price dearly on Prosper, right?
Right,
not
but Prosper had the banks
and
lobbying very big to regulate Prosper. Here, they don't know who's going to regulate, who's going to fight to regulate against it.
It is a global phenomenon.
It's a global phenomenon. If the banks come, they're only a tiny piece of all the great things that are happening on this.
Regulation is not bad either. I mean, it's not all bad if you get in front of it and you embrace it.
We love regulation.
Exactly. See, it's not a bad thing, but I think their question was on the front. So.
I believe in motivation more than regulation. I believe in education more than regulation. I don't think regulation is really.
So one thing
I think
that
it's
we
a
like
lazy
to point out
man's
when
way of saying you shall not do this.
So one thing we like to point out when we're in discussions with regulators is that we were all drawn into this space because we're on the same side. We are about consumer protection. We are about creating better, more equitable systems. We would just like to see it to be less subjective, less post facto, less de jure, and more just built into the system.
Tell you what, I'll answer your question.
Right? Exactly. That's not. So your question on valuation, maybe you can answer that because you're the ICO investor here.
Let's assume everyone in this room completely agrees, and that's the future. I'm just wondering, how do people safely invest in these things?
Safety is not in the ICO vocabulary. I think if you're investing in ICOs, you better understand the entire cycle of the coin, the token. Is there a real use for it? Is there a real way? Is there a reason to buy it? How does that whole cycle work? Is it a valuable cycle? Is it one that's going to increase the value of the token, or is it one that's going to flatten out? And do you care? I think people really need to make sure that they know, and who are the people behind it? Are they capable? Are they motivated? Are they excited about this? Are they creating the movement you want? But I'm valuing
So let me
the
jump
thing.
in. This is important. So very savvy investors can invest in an ICO because it's a security. They can look for return on investment. People who are interested in buying a utility token should be buying that utility token for the usage of the platform that it enables.
Either way, should these things be capped? Should there be lockup periods? You know, when you
So I
if a
think
company raises too much money, it gets drowned in capital.
Okay,
it can't operate.
there's
if
an
people
issue.
sell the things too quickly, you know, it can destroy. So I'm just
There's an issue. The uncapped ICO is a bit of an issue, but I think you've got to leave that up to the issuer. You can't like artificially put some weird cap on it.
But you can decide
But
whether or
I
not to
do think
invest in
that
it.
there, and Joe came up with this, I do think that an ICO should be just the first of many offerings so that people can raise the money as they need it rather than raising it all at once, because then there's not a good use of capital there. If I raise the 240 million that Tezos raised and it sits in this weird convoluted legal structure in Switzerland, what do you do with that? How do you manage that money when you only really need 2 or 3 million a year to run the software?
Exactly.
Well, we
so,
see like
so
a
the
Series A
innovation here
ICO and a Series
is
B ICO.
the trustworthy foundation and the broad stakeholdership. There's been decades of technology in the venture capital industry and other sorts of industries that needs to be paid careful attention to. There are really good reasons why a lot of those mechanisms were built which should really be applied to ICOs and perhaps in some ways to token launches, utility token launches as well.
But it's not really that different, Joseph. I mean, you look at the ICO or IPO, right? You got a book runner, you got a banker running around getting interest. You're making the market, you're marketing, you're doing all those things, right?
It's not that different.
And it costs a lot of money. I mean, it costs what, $500,000 to $750,000 if you want to like hit the button today and do an ICO. So it's not that different.
Those costs are probably going to come down.
They hopefully.
Well, the cool thing about ICOs is they're banking the unbanked and they're insuring the uninsurable. Banks are so heavily regulated that, but if you want to put a small amount of money, €3 into a bank account, the bank will push you away because it costs them $200 to handle the regulation for your account. So all of a sudden, we've created liquidity for the rest of the people of the earth. And this is a big deal, and it's so exciting, and we've all got to push very hard for it. I think we've got a big opportunity ahead, and just make sure that governments know they're in competition for all of you and for all the money and the capital, the businesses of the world.
All of it.
Yeah, so the global context of blockchain and these projects will unlock, as you indicated, an enormous amount of frozen capital globally and unlock a lot of innovation globally as well, because there will be lower barrier to entry to token launch your project. There are many innovators, college kids, etc., that might not get an email back from you if they sent you one, but they're going to be able to permit.
Draper.vc.
Exactly. So permissionless innovation,
them all.
basically.
Well,
And it's a whole other
obviously-
option. It's not equity, it's not debt, it's the tokens, right? It's a complete third leg of the stool.
There's a lot of passion around these, as we can see, but a lot to be worked out, I think. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Terrific. Our pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you.